Imagine if one day your children suddenly disappeared. This is the story of the mysterious disappearance of the 5 children of the Sodder family. Even to this day, the case remains unsolved, and in this video, I shall tell you what I know about this event. But before we talk about the disappearance itself, it is important that we know more about the family first. The Sodder family is composed of Mr. George Sodder, his wife Mrs. Jenny Sodder, and their 10 children. From the eldest to the youngest, their names are John, 22 years old, Joe, 21 years old, Marion, 19 years old, George Jr., 16 years old, Maurice, 14 years old, Martha, 12 years old, Louis, 10 years old, Jenny, 8 years old, Betty, 5 years old, and Sylvia, 2 years old. George Sodder was born in Tula, Sardinia, Italy, in 1895 and was named Giorgio Soddu. He immigrated to the United States at 13 years of age and eventually married Jenny Cipriani several years after and settled in Fayetteville in a 2-story timber frame house. After years of working random jobs like hauling coal, he started a trucking company, which eventually prospered. The story begins on the Christmas Eve of 1945. The family was celebrating Christmas and Marion just returned home to bring presents for her sisters. Jenny asked Maurice and Louis to feed the chickens and bring the cow back to the barn at 10 p.m., whilst George went straight to bed after working all day. At midnight, the telephone suddenly rang, and Jenny decides to pick it up. The call came from a woman that Jenny did not recognize, and there were sounds of clinking glass and laughter in the background. After hanging up and claiming that the unknown woman had called the wrong number, Jenny decides to return to bed and noticed that the lights were still on. The curtains were not drawn as well, so she assumed that her children, besides Marion, who fell asleep on the couch, were already back to sleep in the attic. At 1 a.m., after returning to bed, Jenny was awakened by a particularly loud bang that came from the roof and continued with a rolling noise. Yet there was nothing after it. So she went back to sleep. Half an hour later, she was awakened by the smell of smoke and got up to see that George's office was on fire, precisely around the fuse box and the telephone line. Seeing this, she woke up George and George woke up his older sons. Luckily, George and Jenny managed to make it out alive alongside 4 of their children. Those who made it out tried their best to warn the rest of the family who haven't escaped, yet to no avail. They couldn't even go back upstairs as the stairs themselves were burning. The family attempted to contact the Fayetteville Fire Department through their neighbor's telephone, yet even their telephones would not work at this dire time. Eventually, a passing motorist offered to help, and they managed to contact the fire department after using a phone from the central part of the town. Out of sheer desperation, George climbed the outside wall and broke open one of the attic windows. One of his arms were cut. He intended on using a ladder to reach the attic, but it could not be found anywhere nearby. He even tried to pull both of his trucks up to the house to use them as a stepping stone to climb to the attic window, but none would start. The 6 Sodders who made it could only watch in frustration as the house burns and collapsed within 45 minutes. It was not until morning that the firefighters were able to arrive. The fact that the war made manpower scarce did not help in the slightest. 5 of the Sodder children were assumed to be dead after the firefighters examined the rubble. Many theories emerged after this ghastly event. Some claim that it was all caused by short circuit. Yet there is one particular theory that seemed to make an awful lot of sense. Some suspected that the lost Sodder children did not perish in the fire, but were instead kidnapped by the Sicilian mafia, spurred on by certain words of criticism that George made beforehand. After the fire, George and Jenny started to investigate further and found several important facts regarding this event. The first of which were the bones. The firemen did not manage to find any during their initial search, and an employee of a local crematorium did claim that human bones would still remain even after exposure to temperatures as high as 2000 Fahrenheit or 1090 Celsius. Second was how the neighbors' lights were still on. and even then, George's house had its electricity repaired recently, which further rules out the possibility of a short circuit. Several days after the incident, when George and what remains of his family gathered in the ruins of the house, through chance, Sylvia, the youngest daughter, managed to find a rubber band which looks awfully similar to a grenade pin. When brought to the authorities, they also did confirm that it was one, which further gives credit to the whole thing being arson. Further investigation also revealed that the telephone wires that were in George's office were cut. Yet despite all this, and after asking the help of the FBI, certain parts of the local police refused to cooperate, and so it was all put to a halt. Despite all the setbacks the family suffered, George and Jenny refused to give up and enlisted the help of a detective called C.C. Tinsley, and that man highly suspects that the missing Sodder children were kidnapped instead. The most likely suspect being the Sicilian Mafia, who were angered after George criticized Mussolini and his fascist government in Italy at the time. Several days prior to the fire, there happened to be a life insurance salesman who visited the house. George refused his offer, and the salesman replied that his house would soon go up in smoke and his children destroyed, and all the dirty remarks he made about Mussolini is the cause. In the very next day, someone who appears to be a job seeker even appeared and told him that one day, a pair of fuse boxes would cause a fire after going around the back. Throughout the years, there was never any news of the rest of the Sodder children. There was also a photo of a child in New York who looked like one of the children, Betty, but the validity of their evidence remains obscure. The case was never solved, not even after the death of both George and Jenny. Perhaps you, the viewer, might know more of what happened to the poor Sodder children. And that is the story of the missing case of the Sodder children. I hope all of you enjoyed it and perhaps even find it informative as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story videos or exciting or also interesting case. See you in the next video.